Hey Panthers, happy Monday. This is your ELA Skill of the Week video. I hope you're all at home, healthy, and not driving your parents completely insane. I miss you. Reminder during these videos that you can always play and pause as you need to. Reminder to stay focused, and you should be following along with the guided reading notes that are located under the ELA tab in our Google Classroom. So this week we're going to be talking about character and characterization. Moving on to slide number 2. First, we're going to talk about what exactly is a character. We're going to define character by double-clicking right next to that word. A character is a person in a story. So, as you're typing that, I'm going to be talking about, these are some common characters that we see in our 6th grade classroom. We've got Brianna from President of the 6th grade, and we have Captain Underpants and Dogman, and Katrina and Maya from Ghosts, and we also have our Maze Runner characters, including Newt and Gally and Thomas and Teresa and Frypan and Minho. So this little heart up here, I want you to drag this heart and put it on who's your favorite character that you see on the screen. So I'm going to put I didn't read a lot of these 6th grade books, but I loved Minho in The Maze Runner. He was the keeper of the runners. So reminder that a character isn't always a person in a story. Sometimes a character can be an animal, or sometimes it's an idea, and sometimes it's even a setting. So a really good example of a character being a setting, a setting being a character in a story is actually in The Maze Runner, the first book, because that maze truly acted as a character that drove the plot of the story. It made the other characters more brave and brought out other parts of their personalities that ordinarily would never have been there if they were not in the setting that was the maze. So that's a great example of the setting being a character, or the setting being a character. So continuing to speak on character is this thought of characterization. So characterization is the process by which the writer reveals the personality of a character. So, as a writer is revealing the personality, we can see 6 factors that they use to reveal a personality as you're reading about a specific character. And those 6 things are a character's thoughts. And we've got the little head icon that goes with that. That's what they're thinking and what we know that they're thinking because we're reading that. We also over here with our little running man have a character's actions, what they actually do. Down here, the 2 people yelling is going to be a conflict. So what problems does a character have? That's going to help us reveal the personality. The 4th thing is the cloud, and that's going to be their hopes and dreams. What's driving them to do things? What are they hoping for? What's their end goal? Number 5, their feelings. How do they feel about specific things? And the last one are all the different faces, and those are a character's personality traits. What type of person are they? So we've got the characterization is the process by which the writer reveals the personality of a character. Now they reveal a character through these 6 factors: their thoughts, their actions, the conflicts that they get into, their hopes and dreams, their feelings, and their personality traits. So you can think that these 6 things are what makes a character a character. If we didn't know these 6 things about a character, we would never know their personality. We could never relate to them. So I'm going to do the characterization of a character that we all know and love from the first book, The Maze Runner. Unfortunately, this character will not be joining us as we continue reading the Scorch Trials. And that character is Chuck. So we're going to do this characterization of Chuck. And as we're doing it, we're coming up with why these 6 things are going to be what creates Chuck's personality. So first thing we're going to talk about are what are Chuck's thoughts. So some things that Chuck thought, he thought that Wicked was evil. And they should not be locking up kids in the maze. Over here, our little blue running man, action. What are some things that Chuck did? Well, he was the comedic relief of the glade. He was the funny guy. And then most importantly, the biggest action that Chuck took during the Maze Runner was obviously at the end when he sacrificed himself. If I could spell. Sacrificed himself to save Thomas. Still can't spell that word. Luckily, we're a digital classroom now, and I can change or automatically spell check. So down here, what are some problems, the conflicts that Chuck had? Chuck didn't have a lot of physical conflicts with people. He was small. He was a little bit pudgier. He wasn't trying to boss up to other people. But Chuck was treated very differently by the other gladers. He was treated as like a very immature, and people chose to pull rank on him or didn't really think about his thoughts or feelings. So it may not have been a physical type of conflict, but Chuck had more of like an emotional conflict with a lot of the different gladers. So for conflicts, we're going to put down that emotional conflict with other gladers by treating him differently. So again, for these sentences or these explanations, I'm not looking for giant long paragraphs. I'm just looking for short, little, quick, concise sentences, especially on these guided reading notes, because when we get to the Google Classroom assignment, we're going to go a little bit more in depth with the characterization traits. So what are some hopes and dreams of Chuck? We know that Chuck wanted to get out of the maze, and he will really, most specifically, he wanted to see his mom. And then, what are some things that Chuck was feeling? Well, he really wanted to go back to his parents and to escape the maze. We know that because there was a point in which he's crying to Thomas in the book about his mom and how she misses her, and he also makes her that little figurine that he ends up giving to Thomas at the end of the first book to give to his mother if he ever met her. So the biggest thing that we know about Chuck, what was he feeling? He was heartbroken that he didn't remember his mother, or he knew that she was out there somewhere and he just couldn't remember her. So for feelings, I'm going to write he was heartbroken about not remembering his mother. And he also was feeling a lot of hatred toward the creators. Perfect. And some personality traits of Chuck. He was very goofy and a prankster of some sort. Do you remember when he played that prank on Gally when he was in the bathroom and he shouted in there and ran away? So he was definitely a prankster, especially in the beginning. And then towards the end, he was absolutely, we could write down this word, we could bold it, we could underline it. He was brave. He sacrificed himself in front of the knife to save Thomas at the tail end of the Maze Runner. And then, as we're moving on, we're going to be talking about static characters and dynamic characters. So static characters, right here, we can double click in here. Static characters are characters that do not change throughout the story. They don't change at all. They're very the same. How they presented themselves in chapter 1 is exactly how they remained in chapter 12 or chapter 30 or chapter 40. So some examples of static characters are, we're going to drag and drop the matching socks because we got the Maze Runner, so they need socks for their shoes, and these are going to be a visual for characters who have not changed and they're the same, so the socks match. So some examples of some static characters, we're going to drag the sock over to our first character, that is Teresa. Teresa is a static character. She really doesn't change or develop much in the first book. She's in a coma for most of the Maze Runner, and then she wakes up just in time to help them get out. So maybe she'll turn into more of a dynamic character in the Scorch Trials. Maybe she'll continue to be a static character, but for thinking about the first book, she was most certainly a static character. Another static character throughout the first book of the Maze Runner series was Minho. So Minho is a static character. The entire book, he's always doing what's best to get all the gladers out of the maze, whether that was to nominate Thomas to be the keeper of the runners or to just go out there and run every single day. He always tells it just as it is and has been like that since the beginning of the book, and he continues to be like that at the end, and I'm sure he's going to continue to be that way through the Scorch Trials. One more static character that we can talk about on here is Newt. Newt was a pretty static character throughout the entire Maze Runner. We don't really hear much about Newt throughout. He just is a second in command. He's kind of mean to Thomas, or not mean to Thomas. Him and Thomas are like really cool, but he's been kind of scared throughout the entire book, and at the end we really saw that kind of all come to a conclusion. So he's a pretty static character. Now on the other turn, we're going to talk about dynamic characters. So a dynamic character is going to be the opposite of what a static character is. And those are characters that change throughout the story. Sometimes they change for the good, and sometimes they change for the bad. But here we're going to be using these mismatch socks that represent that these characters are changing, so they're different. We're going to drag and drop those on some characters that are dynamic. So the first dynamic character is, of course, Thomas. Thomas had one of the biggest changes throughout the Maze Runner book. He started off as just the green bean, the newbie, and he was very scared at first and towards the end, and now we saw at the end of the Maze Runner he was a leader amongst the gladers. So he really did make a pretty big change. Another dynamic character is Gally. As much as we all hate Gally, but he's always hated Thomas from the beginning, but we can't just see that as the only part of his character. He did make a big change. In some sense, he kind of went crazy. He went through the changing and started remembering things from his past, and at the end of the first book, he ends up sacrificing himself just so he didn't have to return to the real world, like the outside world. So we kind of witnessed him turn from a regular glader and turned a little bit crazy by the changing and the opportunity to, leave the glade. And our last dynamic character that we're going to talk about is our boy Chuck. Chuck made a very big change in the Maze Runner. He was very shy. He was unconfident. And then he ends it very brave and doing one of the most courageous acts throughout the first book and sacrificing himself for Thomas. So these static and dynamic characters are going to be, you can describe every character as static, whether they change or they do not change throughout a story. So using these guided reading notes, you can complete the rest of your lessons for this week. Have a great week!